Mikhail Tukhachevsky, nicknamed Red Napoleon by the Western media, was a marshal of the Soviet army. His actions paint a picture of a ruthless but effective leader. Climbing to the highest position in the Red Army, his bravery and tactical mind became legendary. He is also a controversial figure, as he was known for brutally ending revolts, even using weapons of mass destruction on his own countrymen. However, just like many of those he persecuted, he too would be mercilessly executed by his own government. This video will cover the life of one of the most famous and controversial military figures in the history of the Soviet Union. Here are some facts that you'll probably need to understand the video. The rank Marshal of the Soviet Union was the highest military rank in the Soviet armed forces. The Russian Civil War was a war between the Red and White armies, the former of which fought for the Bolsheviks while the latter fought to reinstate the Tsar. Mikhail Nikolaevich Tukhachevsky was born on the 16th of February 1893 in Slednevo, Russia, a small rural area in the Smolensk Oblast. Although he was a hereditary noble, his family was poor and there is not much information available about his early life. He attended 2 military schools and graduated in 1914. In July of that year, Tukhachevsky would join the Semyonovsky Guard Regiment, one of the oldest and most prestigious guard regiments in the Russian Imperial Army. Tukhachevsky served as a second lieutenant in the Russian Imperial Army and won 6 medals of bravery in half a year. During this time, he remarked that bravery and confidence were all that was required to reach his goals. Despite this philosophy, Tukhachevsky was captured in early 1915 by the Germans. However, Tukhachevsky had no plans to stay in captivity, attempting to escape 4 times. As a result of this, Tukhachevsky was moved to Ingolstadt, a fortress in Bavaria with the purpose of holding Germany's most troublesome prisoners. During his stay at Ingolstadt, Tukhachevsky would interact with other prisoners, including Charles de Gaulle, the future president of France. Tukhachevsky, being fluent in French, would often subject his fellow prisoners to political rants in which he decried both capitalism and socialism and expressed a variety of uncommon political views. He would later regard these opinions as a result of political inexperience and immaturity. Finally, in September of 1917, Tukhachevsky managed to escape and had returned to Russia by October. Even though he was technically from a noble family, Tukhachevsky joined the Bolshevik Red Army upon his return, right in time for the Civil War. This, as he would later say, was when his life would truly begin. When the fighting started in 1918, the young officer was tasked with defending Moscow. Proving his worth as a military leader, he was given command of the 5th Army by Leon Trotsky in 1919. During the 2 years that followed, he beat 2 of the White Army's most famous generals. Displaying his prowess for military strategy, he would force Alexander Kolchak's army to retreat from Siberia. Later, he would deliver the finishing blow to Anton Denikin's forces in Crimea. Tukhachevsky was then sent to invade Poland, even though the fighting at home had not yet ended. During his initial movement, the capability of his prodigious military mind was on full display. His forces cut into the country at an amazing speed, moving so quickly that not even the Soviet reinforcements sent after him could catch up. He and his troops had set their eyes on Warsaw, the city that would grant them a huge advantage in the war. It was at this point in time when Tukhachevsky would meet an important figure in his life, a young Soviet commander by the name of Joseph Stalin. Stalin had made his primary goal to capture Lviv, a Soviet city that the Poles were occupying. He wanted the city so much that he disobeyed the orders to assist Tukhachevsky at Warsaw. It was during this battle at Warsaw that Tukhachevsky was defeated, shattering his momentum. Because of this, he would blame Stalin for the loss of the Polish War, which occurred shortly after this defeat. Tukhachevsky was not alone in this. During a Politburo meeting in Moscow, Stalin was slammed by the leaders of the Soviet Union, with not one member defending his actions.
What is this? Check me out. I'm checking. Get it. I broke up with my ex-girl. Here's a number. What's that shit say? Psych! That's the wrong number! Hey, let's calm it down. How does that make you feel?
Humiliated and spiteful, Stalin would leave the military in September of 1920. As the Civil War was winding down, Tukhachevsky would put down rebellions with exceptional brutality. In early 1921, Tukhachevsky took command of the 7th Army to handle a rebellion of Soviet Marines near St. Petersburg. The seamen had fortified themselves on the strategically important island of Kronstadt, and what had begun as a series of protests for freedom of speech and democracy quickly turned into riots and skirmishes with the government. The higher-ups in the government had had enough with the rebels, and gave Tukhachevsky 60,000 men and the task of crushing the revolt. He began his assault on the island with the heavy use of artillery to weaken its defenses. Then, over the course of the following days, he would order infantry to rush across the frozen water to the island. Very few of his forces would make it, with the majority of them being slaughtered as they ran through the open, or drowning in holes caused by the bombing. The foot soldiers were followed by machine gun crews, not ordered to fire at the enemy, but at any soldier who might be abandoning their suicidal charge. This, along with the frequent bombing of the island, would gradually reduce the effectiveness of the rebellion's forces. After finally taking control of the island little more than a week later, Tukhachevsky showed even less compassion towards the surviving rebels. Many were executed on the spot. In June of the same year, Tukhachevsky was ordered to suppress the Tambov rebellion. Angry peasants in the area around Tambov started an insurrection, dismantling the local Soviet government. Chemical weapons were used against the peasant insurgents, covering entire forests with poison gas. Tukhachevsky also captured the families of suspected rebels and detained them in numerous specially built concentration camps. In 1925, Tukhachevsky became the Deputy Commissar for Defense under Commissar for Defense Kliment Voroshilov. The two developed a dislike for each other, stemming from differences in ideas. Tukhachevsky advocated for the development and usage of aviation, tank, and rocket technologies, while Voroshilov maintained that cavalry should be the primary focus of the Red Army. During this period, Tukhachevsky would establish his military doctrine. He prioritized the modernization and reform of the Red Army, as well as mentioned before, the usage of tanks and aircraft in combined operations. He also developed deep operation, a military theory that would later turn the tide of the Second World War. In 1931, Tukhachevsky was tasked with industrializing the Red Army. Despite this new assignment, Tukhachevsky's talents were not limited to military management. He occupied himself with music, playing the violin as well as making instruments himself. He even became close friends with the famous neoclassical composer Dmitri Shostakovich and would get him out of hot water more than once. Tukhachevsky was promoted to the rank of Marshal of the Soviet Union in late 1935, alongside 4 others, including his rival Voroshilov. However, Voroshilov was not Tukhachevsky's only powerful rival in the government. By that point, the Soviet Union was entirely under the control of none other than Joseph Stalin, who still carried discontentment towards Tukhachevsky. Following the assassination of a prominent party member, Joseph Stalin became extremely paranoid for his own safety. Now the dictator of the Soviet Union, he decided to eliminate any potential threats to his power, and his old rival, the revered and influential Tukhachevsky, was certainly on the list. When asked by Stalin, Voroshilov had no problem incriminating his colleague, and on May 22, 1937, Tukhachevsky was arrested on Stalin's orders. After being tortured and interrogated, Tukhachevsky confessed to conspiring with other prominent Soviets to overthrow Stalin on a paper spattered with his own blood. In June of 1937, Tukhachevsky and 8 other generals were found guilty for treason in a show trial. The verdict was sent to Stalin, who didn't bother to read it and simply said agreed. Not an hour had passed since the conviction when Tukhachevsky was executed in the typical NKVD manner, with a bullet to the back of the head in a basement. With his last breaths, he declared his unchanged loyalty to the Soviet Union. His wife was executed along with his 2 brothers. His mother, daughter, and 4 sisters were all imprisoned, and 2 of them would die in jail. The husbands of his sisters were executed as well. The elimination of the nation's top generals opened the floodgates for the extensive purging of the Red Army. Hundreds of thousands of officers were shot and sent to labor camps during this great purge. The Soviet forces were weakened tremendously, only a few years before they would be plunged into the Second World War. It is often debated whether Mikhail Tukhachevsky was a war hero, a butcher, or both, and due to Soviet record-keeping, this will most likely remain uncertain. However, one thing that cannot be contested is his significance to the history of the USSR and the Second World War. He destroyed insurgents and belligerent generals alike with the signature brutal efficiency. He whipped the Red Army into shape. Loyal to his country until the bitter end, Tukhachevsky performed actions and wrote theories that would change history. Which one of these people will I cover when I reappear in a month? Well, you can find out when I decide to upload by using that subscribe button.